and it's entitled Lydia's Conversion in Philippi. From Troas we put out to sea and sailed straight for Samothrace, and the next day we went on to Neapolis. From there we travelled to Philippi, a Roman colony and the leading city of that district of Macedonia, and we stayed there several days. On the Sabbath, we went outside the city gate to the river, where we expected to find a place of prayer. We sat down and began to speak to the women who had gathered there. One of those listening was a woman from the city of Thyatira named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth. She was a worshipper of God, and the Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. When she and the members of her household were baptized, she invited us to her home. "If you consider me a believer in the Lord," she said, "come and stay at my home." And she persuaded us.
Thank you very much for bringing us the reading. Good morning, everybody. It's really great to be here, great to be back. It's always great to come back a second time. However it went the first time, I feel like at least you're giving me a second chance. So thank you for that. And Sue and I are delighted to be here and be with you. When I was here last time, I began the message by saying that I also used to be a minister, a pastor of a larger church, and that from what Sue and I see travelling around the country, this isn't an easy thing to do. Loads of jobs aren't easy, but roles in a church in this time, in this season, are not easy. So please bear that in mind. Please be praying for your leaders. So forgive me if I repeat one or two things, including that. Pray for your leaders in this season. I know it's a season of change as well for you. If you're visiting, you might not know that. But please bear that in mind, and please go on praying for your leaders in this season. If you do, they will be blessed and you will be blessed. It will be a win-win thing. Since I've been away, I've been working on a resource for LICC, the Leith Institute of Contemporary Christianity, as we should call it, which involves a whole range of different things. It involves a book, and if you'd like a book, they're on a promotion at the back, cheaper than Amazon or anywhere else, and some videos. And one of the people on the videos is a face that you might know. Let's see that image now. Libby, who was, of course, on staff here. And so what you do is you do an online assessment tool for church leaders called Vital Signs, and then you go to, you get some results, and you go to some 90-second videos. And I thought, because Libby's on like a quarter of the videos, you don't want to see a video of mine, you want to see one of Libby's videos. So let's have a little look at one of these just as an example. They're free to have a look at, by the way.
The things that we do and say when we represent our church to others speaks volumes about our God. Everybody's front line is different, and it's good to remember the front line that occasionally knocks on our church door. Imagine a week in the life of a busy church building. Picture the groups that meet, the people who come through the doors. This includes people who ordinarily wouldn't be seen in a service on a Sunday, but they're there for slimming club, Pilates, or parents and toddlers, or to fix the boiler and ensure the building is kept fit for purpose. Each of these provide opportunities to connect with people who might not yet be Christians. This is when the front line comes to us. They probably won't hear the sermon on a Sunday, but they're talking with us and observing our actions midweek. They might not sing at a service, but they're having a cup of tea with us in the church kitchen. Maybe you don't have your own church building, but you communicate with the people you hire your venue from or others who make church happen. These interactions are always fantastic opportunities to showcase Jesus' character working in us and through us. For all of us, we represent Jesus in these moments. As we remind others of their front lines, let's remember that as church leaders, these types of front lines are right in front of us.
I'm disproportionately pleased with that zigzaggy line, by the way, of the vital signs. When we designed the book, the publisher's IVP, they designed a beautiful zigzaggy line, an ECG line, and then I showed it to some doctors and some nurses, and they said, that person's probably going to die within 24 hours on that line. So we managed to persuade them to show a slightly healthier line. So that's Libby in the boiler room. Whether she knew where the boiler room was in P's and G's, you can tell me afterwards. But the idea that sometimes our front lines, the places where we spend most time with people who don't yet share our faith, sometimes they come to us, is the idea there. And there's a relationship between that and the passage, because these vital signs that the book is about, the resource is about, they're relatively small things. And this passage in Philippi, compared with some of the passages you looked at already in the early church, it's not a large-scale thing. The message of Christianity coming to Philippi, it's not necessarily large, and it's not necessarily a quick start. Both things were a surprise to me when I looked at it in a little bit of detail to prepare for coming today. And both things, I hope, will be an encouragement to us all. They're certainly an encouragement to me. Compared with the other parts of the Sharing Our Story series that you've been on, this is hardly a momentous start in the story of the church in Europe. Acts 2 in Pentecost, you looked at a couple of weeks ago, which I nearly thought was my reading when Dave sent the initial series. 3,000 added to the number of believers. Those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to that number that day. And then last week, the passage that Dave was looking at ends with, and every day the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Here you've got a much smaller start. In this chapter in Acts 16, it basically features 3 people and the households of 2 of them. The church in Philippi was started by 3 Jews, Paul, Silas, and Timothy, and Luke, probably a Gentile, sharing their story, who then had an initial congregation of 1 woman and her household. Not the most dramatic, but it might be really helpful for some of us as a result, because the long-term results are dramatic. From this unimpressive start, what you get is a sizable, well-organized church that is established. And you can see that documented elsewhere. And it's good to, therefore, not underestimate small starts. And it's good to particularly look at Lydia, because she is one character that's often overlooked in the Bible. Although Lydia only appears in chapter 16 here, some people think she's implied in Philippians 4:3, where Paul mentions some key women who've contested by his side. We can learn a lot from her life and ministry, and so I want to start there. Now, I'm a bit biased here because I'm mixed race, Asian and British, and I said last time, although it's a cliche to come to Scotland and claim Scottish roots, I'm mixed race Asian and Scottish. We're Fergus clan on my mum's side. But if you think of it this way, the church coming to Philippi is the first time the church is coming to Europe. Lydia is the first documented European convert to Christianity. So therefore, if you've never thought about it this way, and I hadn't particularly, the first European documented convert to Christianity is not a man, is not a priest, is not Jewish, so is not automatically in the previously understood group of who is in and who is important, and actually is not even European. So the first European convert to Christianity is an Asian businesswoman. And I like that. Isn't that just like our God of surprises, who picks out the least likely person to fit the mold and stamps his authority on her? How many times have you been picked for something that you might not feel adequate for? You might have imposter syndrome, but our God chooses you to be there and says he will meet you more than halfway. Lydia was from Thyatira, and Thyatira is in Asia Minor, hence the Asian roots. And Lydia almost certainly learnt her trade in this purple cloth business from Thyatira. Now, I could talk to you about purple just briefly, but my wife Sue would be a much better person to speak about this. Sue has a PhD in colour chemistry, everybody. And so I feel bad to just be speaking about this now when Sue is just there. So would you welcome Sue to the stage? So Sue, your PhD was in paint research, so you could tell everybody why watching paint dry is interesting, after all. But let's not do that. Why is dealing in purple even a thing, even a business?
Okay, we'll start with science first, because as a scientist, so much of science points to God for me. So if you're here studying science, or you do science, or, so much of science for me points to God. Just the order, just everything, just when we came to church this morning and you saw all the greens out there and how beautiful it was, and green is in the middle of the visible spectrum for us as humans, so we just see more greens. But we'll go back to purple. So in this time, we didn't know how to manufacture synthetic dyes. That was like the 1850s. William Perkin was the first guy to manufacture a synthetic dye. They called it Movine. He was looking for something else. He wasn't looking for a dye. I think he was actually looking for a cure for malaria or something. But so back in this time, the dye that was used to produce Lydia's cloth was called Tyrian purple. Tyrian purple was made from mollusks that lived in the sea. So to make Tyrian purple, they had to gather the mollusks. They had to extract something from like the bile or something. They were boiled up. This was a long and difficult process to make a dye from, what are really quite small creatures. You would need hundreds and hundreds of them to even dye a small amount of cloth. So the amount that you would need to dye bolts of cloth was just huge. So this is an incredibly rare and expensive dye. So it would only be used for incredibly special occasions or people.
Thank you. Do thanks, Sue.
Is that the answer?
Yeah. You can see why I didn't want to give that answer. Sue gives a much better answer than that. So you've got these mollusks, you extract them from your shells, and you boil them for several days. We've got an image. No, we haven't got an image of that to show you. But you imagine how rare that is, and therefore in the rarity, that's how purple gets now associated with royalty and royal garments, still prevalent today. So that's the business that Lydia is in. She's learnt it from Asia Minor, where she's come from. Let's look particularly at verse 14. One of those listening was a woman from the city of Thyatira named Lydia, a dealer in purple. She was a worshipper of God. The Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. So Lydia is 400 miles from home, but gets what she needed. She gets more than she bargained for, in other words. And part of our prayer this morning was that might be true for somebody coming seeking, looking for something. Lydia doesn't have the full picture, but she is looking for something. And it doesn't stop there. Lydia then responds to the call. She chooses to follow him. She was baptized, and I'm guessing she then helped her household to believe, and her household are baptized. Paul and Silas believe her testimony of faith. They accept the condition of her invitation into her home. The men of God trusted her, and they accept her hospitality, and then she then becomes the host for this first church in Philippi. And she continued to have believers meet in her home and hear about Jesus. Acts 16:40 tells us about that, and she goes on hosting. There's another little element in this that I hadn't always noticed. So they've got this small start that leads to a big thing, but it doesn't necessarily happen in one go. In that reading, one of those listening, the words used almost certainly mean listening more than once. So it isn't just that Lydia hears Paul and says, okay, I'm in. She might have heard this message several times. The tense of to hear implies several times, over several days, which is important to me because rather than just hearing Lydia's conversion straight away, she had a chance to get to know Paul and Silas and others. So their whole personality, who they are, becomes part of the deal, as well as the words that they say. And then, of course, it says the Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. So however good Paul was, it wasn't Paul's message that made Lydia respond to it. It was the Lord that did it. And for this series, where we're looking at how we can help be messengers of Jesus to other people wherever we find ourselves, and the different ways that happens in Acts and elsewhere, we can learn this, that sometimes you can win an argument and not win that person for Christ because it wasn't your job, it was Jesus's. And sometimes you can lose the argument, seemingly, but God can open their heart because of who he is, not because of who you are and your willingness to serve. So let's just look briefly at Paul as well and what's going on with Paul and try to learn a bit from him. The place where they go to is not a temple, it's not a synagogue, because there probably wasn't one. There wasn't technically enough people to have a synagogue in Philippi yet. Technically enough men is what you would have required. So some people are gathering around a river, around a thin place, if you like. Essentially a place where you can go and try to pray. The Celtic traditions have a tradition of thin places. Our God is omnipresent, he's everywhere, but there are some places where it seems like, it feels like, or the distance between us and God feels less. And they've gone to a place like that. I hope and pray that P's and G's is that for you, and that you meet God here. Of course, if there are thin places, then there are also fat places, and you don't live here. So you're called to go from here to those thicker places, let's call them that, that's slightly politer, and make them a bit thinner by your presence, I think. And so that's something of what is going on here for Paul, I think. He takes a strategic opportunity in a strategic place. There isn't a synagogue, so he goes to where they're worshipping. There's a lesson about breaking down cultural boundaries, and that happens throughout chapter 16, not just with Lydia, but with a slave girl and with a Roman jailer. And then there's this lesson about our bit and God's bit. They're willing to serve, they give a message, and God meets them more than halfway. As I was thinking about that, I was thinking about a woman called Maggie, who for me conveys something similar here, where it isn't the church leaders who move Maggie's heart, but they do have a role to play. And I think that's true for all of us. Maggie wasn't in your church or mine, but she joined a course like an Alpha course. It wasn't an Alpha course, but a Seeker course. Other courses are available. And Maggie was one of those people who love to ask the difficult questions. You know those people on Alpha? I actually quite like them because I like the whole apologetics, reason that we have faith thing. So she would ask why there is suffering in the world. What about other faiths? Yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. And the leaders would try to give their best answer. If Sue had been in the room, Maggie would have asked about faith and science, that kind of thing. The leaders thought they were making no progress with Maggie whatsoever, until one day Maggie wrote a letter to them. And the letter was in the form of a poem. And the poem was trying to describe to the leaders that actually it wasn't so much their answers, it was them that mattered to Maggie. And the way that she worded it was that you, the leaders, you represent Jesus to me. And so because of your series that you're looking at, I want to read you this poem, but I want you to take it personally. I want you to picture the people that you share time with, LICC would call it your front line, during the week, who don't yet share your faith. And I want you to imagine them saying these words to you, because they don't always show their hand to you, your friends who don't yet share your faith. So this is a rare insight into one person, into what they're thinking. So this is what Maggie says. They open the letter and it says this: do you understand that you represent Jesus to me? Do you understand that when you treat me with gentleness, it raises the question in my mind that maybe he is gentle too. Maybe he isn't someone who laughs when I get hurt. Do you understand that when you listen to my questions and you don't laugh, I think, what if Jesus is interested in me too? Do you understand that when I hear you talk honestly about arguments and conflicts and scars from your past, I think maybe I'm just a regular person instead of a bad, no good little girl who deserves abuse. If you care, I think maybe he cares. And then there's this flame of hope inside of me. And for a while I'm afraid to breathe because it might go out. Do you understand that your words are his words to someone like me? Please be who you say you are. Please, God, don't let this be another trick. Please let this be real. Please. Do you understand that you represent Jesus to me? Well, the leaders of the course, they were deeply moved, as I'm sure you can imagine, and they got straight on the phone to Maggie and they said, Maggie, that's beautiful and it's so helpful. Do you mind if we share it? And that she said yes, and that it's in a book, and that's why I've got it and can share it freely with you. But Maggie also said this. She said, and you need to know something else. You need to know that since I've written that, I'm in. And they said, no, tell us what you mean by that. And she said, no, I've decided that this Christianity thing is for me. I'm in. And then the leaders of the course said exactly what I would say in those circumstances. They said, which of our arguments was it that convinced you? And she said, it wasn't any of your arguments. I saw enough. I saw enough. The biggest survey of Christianity in the UK recently is a thing called Talking Jesus. And it says that the reach of the church is greatest through all the normal everyday relationships of practicing Christians. Relying on the general draw to church is going to be problematic. We should go on doing that, but the best bridge is the individual Christian. In those circumstances, you represent Jesus to those you are with. And it isn't about winning the argument, it is about trying to do your stumbling best and God meeting you more than halfway. What I learned from this passage is willingness to serve, God looking for the opportunity in a strategic location or place or time, and as I say, God meeting us more than halfway. May it be that we give that a go this week. Amen.